Alright, it's been over 2 weeks now since Ubisoft granted access to Skull and Bones to a large audience via a closed beta, and the dust seems to have settled down a little. So in today's video, I'm going to address some feedback I've seen from the community that I believe need to be discussed, because it seems that a lot of people are having a lot of misconceptions about what the game actually is, or are just reacting with passion because Skull and Bones happens to be not what they had expected. Now, before we jump into the topic of today here, yes, I have thoroughly enjoyed my experience with the beta of Skull and Bones, and I can't wait to jump back in on February 13th, which is when we'll have early access to the game. That being said, no, unlike what some people have said, I am not paid by Ubisoft to talk positively about Skull and Bones. In fact, I will start by talking about the criticism that I believe is fair and valid, at least based on my experience. First, it is true that Skull and Bones offers nothing revolutionary, and that is the gameplay here feels very classic, some would say outdated. Skull and Bones is definitely not Game of the Year material, and also anyone familiar here with MMOs will be familiar with how you progress in a game. Next, it is true that the start of the game is not exciting, and even, dare I say, boring. At least this is how I felt for the first 2 hours, and here clearly there doesn't seem to be anything at stake or any reason to pursue the game's story, which is also quite uninteresting and uninspiring. However, that is often the case with MMOs. Early quests here are here to teach you the ropes, and it only gets better once you are capable of creating your own story in a game, and Skull and Bones is no different. There is the technical aspect of Skull and Bones. This game is indeed not a seamless experience. There are loading screens between land and sea sequences, or even when having a dialogue. Some far-off island textures also look dated, and the waves that crash on the shore look horrible. All of that is true. We also need to talk about the price of Skull and Bones, because $70 at launch, well, that is quite a lot considering what Skull and Bones is. Sure, one might argue that this is a live service game and that there is no subscription fee, but given the fact that this game offers nothing that's groundbreaking and the gameplay is somewhat limited, $70 is definitely too much, in my opinion. Also, I would say that it's true that you mostly play the game as a ship and not as the captain, which can be indeed confusing since you do play as a captain in the third person when you are on land, and that is justifiably making people wonder why that isn't the case when we are on our ships. And one might argue that this is due to the long and supposedly chaotic development the game has been through. We're talking about the development that might have exceeded 10 years, so yes, it is expected the game could feature some artifact from previous versions of the game. So now that the genuine criticism is out of the door, I think it is time to address the discontent, or dare I even say the hatred that's coming from a part of the gaming community towards Skull and Bones. And quite frankly, I usually make videos like these here, but this time I really feel like a lot of negativity has been around this game, and it's quite unfair in my opinion, so it needs to be addressed. So I think that the biggest misconception that people have had with Skull and Bones is that this game was supposedly meant to be a spin-off of Assassin's Creed's Black Flag, which was never supposed to be the case actually. In fact, even when the game was showcased in 2018, gameplay looked quite similar to what we've seen in the recent closed beta. Ubisoft showcased a tactical combat multiplayer game in which you play as a ship. There was no boarding with no melee combat, no island exploration, nor did Ubisoft ever say that there would be some. Thinking or claiming otherwise is at best misinformation, maybe wishful thinking, or an outright lie to follow some narrative that says Skull and Bones equals bad because it's not the game that they wanted, as if their opinion was the only legitimate one. Next, let's talk about the length of the development, which has lasted for over 10 years at this point. And here I think that Ubisoft made one major mistake, and that was revealing the game way too early. A mistake we've seen time and time again in the gaming industry, unfortunately. Had Ubisoft not revealed the game and had they waited until, say, last summer when they had their first non-NDA closed beta, expectations would have been lower than they are now, because the problem we see is that you have a lot of people who cannot understand that Skull and Bones only features is what it has, and this is a dynamic, massively multiplayer world with a dynamic economy, ship-to-ship combat, and walkable landing zones, and all of that. Sure, these have loading screens after years of development. Well, being a backer of Star Citizen for over 11 years at this point, I can tell you that delays or even start overs are not uncommon in the gaming industry. We just never or rarely hear of them because games normally get announced when they are feature complete, or simply because they get cancelled behind closed doors, something that Ubisoft could not do because they were contractually obliged by the Singaporean government to release a game. So, why did it take so long for Ubisoft to release their game? Well, it's not because Ubisoft has developed some groundbreaking technology that would allow them to create huge, seamless worlds where you could do everything in first person. Thanks, for example, going from one place to another without any loading screens. No, that's Star Citizen, right? That's what they are doing with a $600 million budget. And there is no way that Ubisoft would ever spend that time of money for such a niche game. No, what took so long was to make the game simply work with the technology that they already had. And the major problem here is a problem that Black Flag didn't have. They didn't need to worry about that, and that is the multiplayer aspect of the game. There are just so many issues and challenges that developers need to find solutions to that simply do not arise when developing a solo game. Issues like desynchronization, player limit per instance, exploits that players may find and that could affect the overall experience, catering to different player levels while finding the right balance. The point here is that a single-player experience might be completely broken once you try to add a multiplayer dimension to it, and finding the right solutions to make the game work may take many years and involve remaking the game from scratch because some core coding might not have been adapted for the final objectives of the developer. That is why Skull and Bones took such a long time to develop. Yes, it may have originally started as what looked like a Black Flag spin-off, but giving it a multiplayer dimension proved to be more complicated than anticipated, and some features like melee combat simply had to be discarded for technical reasons. In the end, from what I have seen from the closed beta, we are getting a game that is technically very clean. I had no issues to report, and also nothing that really broke the game. I think that it's actually quite fun. A fun tactical combat MMO with some exploration and trade elements, and it would be a shame to discard it because it turns out to be not a Black Flag Online. I also hear people say it must include melee combat and physical boarding because it's a pirate game, but that doesn't make any sense because pirate is a theme like sci-fi, medieval or steampunk, not a genre like racing, city building, RTS or adventure RPG. Skull and Bones is a tactical combat MMO, and that is its genre here, and it is set in a pirate theme, and that is it. Last but not least, I also saw a lot of criticism about the location of Skull and Bones, the Indian Ocean. People are saying, oh, this is terrible, it's not in the Caribbean. Why is it not in the Caribbean? Well, it turns out that the core of piracy around the world was not the Caribbean, but it was, in fact, the Indian Ocean. Historically speaking, it's very interesting and also provides with some really interesting diversity. Now, that's really interesting, in this day and age, we see a lot of online keyboard warriors claiming for more diversity in games. Every time it feels forced and cheesy and nobody likes that. Here, for once, we get the right diversity with different people from where they are from. We're going to the west coast of Africa, we're going to India, we're going to Singapore, we're going to Indonesia. All of these people there will be represented where they are from, and these were real people with real pirates that are going to be in the game as well. Some of these people were notorious for the piracy, notably the people around modern day Indonesia and Singapore, but also around the east coast of Africa. They are all going to be there, and it's really interesting to interact with these characters and listen to their language, see how they look like, their different ships that they had, their different technologies. It's all in the game. It's fascinating, and you never hear any praises for that. That's really interesting. Instead, you hear, oh, it's not in the Caribbean, but it's completely discarding all the work that has been done by Ubisoft Singapore to make this as authentic as possible. So anyway, my point here is that on the final note, I would say that we are lucky to have Skull and Bones released. Almost every other game with such a difficult development would have been cancelled. And when I hear people that they've waited for 10 years for what we're going to get, I actually feel bad for them, because surely they have plenty of other games to play over the past 10 years to keep us busy. I've not waited for 10 years for Skull and Bones to come, but I'll gladly play it when it comes out, and you'll certainly see more videos about it on this channel. With that comes the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed it, please let me know with a thumbs up. If you did not, and I know that a lot of people will not, well, let me know as well with some comments and some thumbs down. That's okay, I can take it. Subscribe for more gaming content, and I will see you guys in the next one.